Good evening. I'm Amy Brooke, and among other things, I'm a hypnotherapist and a coach. And I have a special thing for nature, and not in the way most people do. While I do enjoy being out of doors, I also was taught to understand the special language of patterns, metaphors, and symbol that nature speaks. And I was taught them by a very, very kind God. I lost my religious slash spiritual language due to gaslighting and abuse, to where hearing truth in the terms I used to enjoy hearing them in became very triggering for me. And in that time of my life, God took my hand and taught me a new language for He and I to communicate in. And it was a language of metaphors and patterns and symbols. And while I no longer struggle to hear spiritual truths taught in any language, I love that I acquired this special way of seeing and understanding the world. The thing about nature is that she is ever and always changing, and yet she's unchanging. Her ways haven't been passed down or translated by men. She has lived alongside us and nourished men from the beginning of time. She has been our supporter, and yet she's also our teacher if we're wise enough to understand what she wants to teach us. All of nature testifies of truth. Nature herself is pure, unadulterated truth. So something really spectacular is coming up for us on the reality show slash nature channel that is Your Life this week. You may know already that there will be a blood moon in our sky. My brilliant and beautiful friend, Ali Duzette, has this to say about the upcoming blood moon lunar eclipse that will be in the sky on November 19th. With the connection between sun and moon disrupted, even just for a short time and even just partially, it sets off a healing crisis in all human beings on the planet. For the next 2 weeks, everyone will be dealing with emotional disruption, especially surrounding money, stability, land, foundations, pleasure, sexuality, and more. So, this is the preview of the movie that's coming up over the next year and a half. But this preview is a 2 week preview. Um, Ali suggests that we pay attention to what comes up in the next few days and over the next 2 weeks. What comes up during that time will come back again and again for the 18 months ahead until it is healed and resolved. So, one of Ali's suggestions is that we take notes during these 2 weeks. Okay. Essentially, we are being invited by the universe to participate in a worldwide healing crisis. For the next 2 weeks, we will all be dealing with life disruption. Another thing to keep in mind, like Ali said, whatever issues surface for you over the next 2 weeks will resurface over and over for the next 18 months until it's healed or resolved. So think of it this way: whatever seed or egg you are now, wherever you are now, whatever is inside of you now, it's going to be fertilized during this time. And over the next 18 months, interesting, we've got a time span of a double gestation, will produce a grown baby. So the question is, who do you want to be at the end of that 18 months? I wanted to share some insights and ideas, not necessarily about the blood moon, because Ali is without question the expert in that area. I wanted to share some insights and ideas about healing crises in general and what patterns show up in a healing crisis. As a hypnotherapist and a coach, I consider myself a rebirth doula. I doula my clients through the process of rebirth, so I get to see the patterns that show up. Because as we're going through this process, we want to stay on top of the waves as they roll forth, right? As taught, of course, by nature. See, we've got this wave pattern. We want to stay on top of those waves. And everybody knows that riding the wave is a lot funner than getting smashed down by every wave as it comes along. As someone who sees patterns and especially loves to find them in nature, I want to point out something really valuable to understand: that a healing crisis is actually a death. What follows a death can be suffering and loss. But death can also be followed by rebirth. And essentially, the choice is ours to make. As a doula and a home birthing mama to 8 babies, and a geek with a fascination for all things birth, I want to share some insight into what's ahead for us going through this healing crisis as a parallel to the process of giving birth. And for anyone that hasn't experienced giving birth, this may be extra helpful because so many elements are counterintuitive. Also, we live in a time where even women that have given birth may have given birth in circumstances that didn't allow or inhibited their need to tune into these subtle patterns. So we may have given birth, but not necessarily picked up on all of these patterns that teach us how to stay grounded in the process, because it helps us come from a place of trust and understanding, because we're recognizing these patterns as they're showing up. Okay, so let's look for some of those patterns. Now we're looking for connections between a healing crisis that's going to be catalyzed by the eclipse that's coming up. And we're going to be comparing that to the birth that we experience as women going through labor and delivery. So both of these things, a healing crisis and birth, they both come in waves. Okay. Waves consist of 2 parts. We've got a crest and a trough. Labor consists of 2 parts, right? The process of labor, a contraction and a rest, and a contraction and a rest. I always have to reassure my clients that every high will eventually come to a low. This is normal. My clients will often call me and say, I was doing so well, and then I lost it, and I've gone back. And I always get to reassure them and help them to understand, no, you went through a contraction. Now you went through a rest. This is just the next contraction. You have not just come through growth for nothing. Okay, every contraction moves the baby down and out. We can't see it. We don't recognize that that's actually happening. We don't see the process because it's not in front of us, right? But it is happening. Trust it. The second pattern, this one's huge. This one's so beautiful. Okay, don't take it lying down. This healing crisis, if we take it lying down, it's going to lay us flat. Okay, use the forces of nature to your advantage. Think about how many deliveries are complicated because a woman is lying flat on her back to deliver a baby. If you think about it as far as anatomically, when a woman's lying flat on her back, gravity is pulling the baby down, which is going to inhibit the baby being able to put equal pressure, right? Balanced pressure on the cervix. Balanced pressure on the cervix will help open that portal. It'll help open that door for baby to emerge, right? But if we're coming at it from an angle, right, that's not going to happen the same way. A lot of babies end up being birthed cesarean section because of this angle. Isn't the baby's whole head isn't putting pressure onto the cervix. So don't take this lying down. Stand up, face it head on. Okay. As in birth, there may be moments that you're going to want out. Don't keep, you're not going to want to keep riding the wave, right? But remember, it's temporary. Keep breathing, face it head on. Don't take it lying down. Every contraction can cause a breakdown or cause a breakthrough. Because whatever your reality is, it's going to be shaken up. Labor is a moment that life just gets shaken up. That is the reality. No one gives birth vacuuming, fixing the car, doing laundry, and running kids to school. Life changes for a while, and that's normal. That's what's expected. Okay, so remember, things are going to be shaken up. Eclipses and labor also speed things up. Labor over time progresses in tempo. Okay. It gets more and more, it builds in intensity, it crescendos. Okay. We're going to see that as well. We're going to see a crescendo happen. With this eclipse, as with birth, the inevitable outcome will be the outcome. Whatever is inevitable in your life will be the outcome of the events brought on by the eclipse. Being pregnant inevitably leads to delivering a baby. That's what's inevitable. Okay. It's not really a surprise. This is what it is. Birth has an incredible power to create huge changes in a small amount of time. Think about the changes that happen from the time you go into labor until the time you deliver a baby. Okay. If nothing more, in what other circumstances can you lose up to 20 pounds in a day? Right? And your role changes, like you become mother, you're birthed into being a totally different creature. Okay. There's so much potential for change here. The eclipse can also give us the power to heal a lot in a short amount of time. Okay. So we're given condensed power during birth. We're given condensed power during this eclipse. Okay. Remember, soft, not rigid. You're going to take this head on. You're going to take this standing up, but you're not going to take this rigidly. Softly. Open, not closed. Breathe into the pain, right? There's a lot of power there in being soft and open and in power, not in being rigid, closed, and in pain. That's powerlessness, right? With birth and with the eclipse, what is on the inside will soon be outside. Okay, things will be brought to light, both ugly and beautiful. What is there will be expanded and brought out to see the light of day. And it doesn't matter what symptoms you no longer have, or how well you're doing on the outside, or how far you've come on the outside. Okay, what is inside will soon be brought out to look at face to face. So, one thing that we need to do is remember the big picture and not get lost in the details, because birth is part of the creation process. And the entire universe and everything in it essentially is giving birth to you. It's working for you. And it may not feel like it. It may feel like it's working against you. But coming from a place of fear and victimhood and not facing it head on, will leave you feeling like every wave is knocking you down. Just like in the moment of delivering a baby, you have to be focused on the big picture during a contraction to be able to ride that wave. You have to be in the moment and seeing the big picture to ride the wave of the rebirth process. Remember, it's going to feel like a bunch of little deaths. And they may or may not be followed by rebirths and expansion and growth if you do it right, if you do it with trust, if you trust that this is all working for you and you use this force in the same way gravity works to help women deliver babies. Because every woman that's ever delivered a baby standing up or squatting or kneeling or in any way upright, that's a lot of help. It's powerful help. It makes everything easier and better and faster. Okay. And really, another thing to remember is for all of this eclipse, rebirth, healing crisis stuff, is you're in a place of power. You get to decide. Institutionalized birth has taught us to walk into a hospital, hand our childbirth over to an MD, and become a patient. And in honesty, that energy won't work out well. We have to place ourselves in a position of sovereignty. You get to be in charge here. You get to decide who you want in your space during this process. Do you want to be surrounded by support, or do you want to have moments of solitude? You listen to and follow your intuition. What do you need to prepare for this process? Again, it's up to you. Follow your intuition. You get to be 100% accountable for everything. You get to choose. A couple of other thoughts. So a few weeks ago, a question came across my Facebook feed from a woman in a women's group. And in essence, her question was this: my perception of the world's perception of birth and parenting is that it's negative. It feels like a burden. And she was questioning it, and yet it seemed pervasive. And so, in answer to her question, I responded that my 20 years of being a mom and delivering 8 children, whom I've had the pleasure of nursing and raising 7, and the beautiful experience of burying 1, that experience woke up my intuition. Becoming mother opened me up to myself. Giving birth gifted me with the feminine being I knew that I was. Now, all of my children were born at home, and I believe that this system takes many of these things away from us. Birth institutionalized keeps us from the depth and beauty that are birthright. And I taught her that parenting and birthing for me are deeply spiritual practices. And I also pleaded with her to not lean on the world for the perceptions of truth, and for her to look inside of herself. Because looking at these two things, they're both deeply spiritual processes. And we get to choose how we perceive the process that is just ahead of us. Will it wake us up? Will it rebirth our intuition? Will it help us become who we've always known we are? Will we use it to deepen our practice of our spiritual practices? Faith, hope, love, humility, gratitude. Another thing to remember is that we'll all be going through this process together. So let's midwife for each other. One thing that Allie suggested is that it's super powerful to take notes, because what comes up in this 2 weeks is your work. Anything you can get rid of beforehand, all the better, right? We've got a couple of days until then. But get real with yourself and ask the hard question: what am I here for? Out of all of this is going to come 2 differing ways of being. We're all being driven toward 2 ends. Okay. And the first one is this: sovereignty, healing, growth, trust, faith, hope, courage, moving forward, expansion, spiritual growth. The other is victimhood, blame, lack of accountability, fear, trauma, loss, giving up, spiritual death. And you get to decide. This is where it gets real. I've posted a link for Allie's website in the comments if you're interested in all of the fabulous astrological information and more details about the actual eclipse itself. And if you're needing a sounding board for an understanding about what you can do to prepare, what you can do through the process, send me a DM. My Facebook group is Blessings Amy Brooke, or you can send me an email, and I'll also post my my email address in the link. Let's connect. I'd love to connect with you and give you what insights I can. We could schedule an appointment, get some work done before, during that entire process. So connect with me, and have a good evening.